Chapter 16, Chains of the Tribunal, the God in Chains. I had knelt in this chamber once before, not as prisoner, as exemplar. The chamber of adjudication had been the sanctified heart of Dawnspire, the place where disputes were resolved beneath divine illumination, where truth was called down from heaven and revealed in unfiltered brilliance. I had stood in the center circle, armor polished, oath burning steady in my chest, while High Justicar Malrick commended my clarity of conviction before the assembled tribunal. The marble had reflected light like water, the banners had hung unbroken. Solan's presence had felt warm, not overwhelming, not distant, simply present. Now the chamber felt like a cathedral hollowed by famine. The banners were gone, the braziers extinguished, the marble etched with siphoning arrays, and I was no longer standing in the circle. I was suspended above it. Radiant chains threaded through my wrists, my ribs, my spine, not piercing flesh, but binding the light within me to the architecture carved into the floor. The sigils were familiar in shape, yet warped in function. They pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat, adjusting tension not to physical strain, but to intention. When anger flared, they tightened. When despair crept in, they constricted. When I sought clarity, they hesitated. That was their flaw. They were built to bind obedience, not thought. Across from me, Maeryn hung in identical confinement. Her half-broken gauntlet spat sparks where divine feedback disrupted its worn channels. Her jaw was set, teeth bared in silent fury. To my right, Bram knelt inside concentric suppression circles that hummed with dull, grinding resistance. Even bound, he radiated a low warmth that seeped outward like embers buried under ash. Lisa's cage was cruelly precise, mirrored glyphs reflecting her fire back into itself, forcing her magic to collapse before ignition. The chamber's center burned with unnatural brilliance, and above it, Thalen, not in glory, in captivity. His projection hovered above the siphon array, immense, radiant, fractured. Chains of luminous script coiled around his form, each inscribed with binding language drawn from tribunal doctrine, not divine law, tribunal law. That distinction struck like a blade. Solan's expression was not wrathful. It was restrained, not because he lacked power, because he refused to unleash it, and that refusal was killing him. Malrick stood within the circle, bathed in siphoned radiance. He didn't wear armor, he didn't need to. The light clung to him in sheets, dense, sharpened, unnaturally coherent. He looked stabilized, more stable than any paladin had looked in weeks, and that terrified me. "You see it now," he said without turning. The inefficiency. The siphon pulsed. Light flowed from Solan's bound projection into Malrick's chest, not violently, deliberately, measured, like a physician draining blood to transfuse into a stronger vessel. I felt the transfer as hollowness. Solan's presence inside me flickered, like a star glimpsed through storm clouds. And beneath that flicker, emotion. Regret. Not for himself. For us. For allowing this architecture to exist. For teaching obedience before discernment. For trusting structure to safeguard conscience. I swallowed hard. "You forged the command," I said. Malrick turned slowly. Yes, the admission carried no shame. "I shaped the divine current. Redirected pressure along sanctioned channels. Solan's authority supplied the resonance. I supplied the clarity. You made me hear my God lie." Malrick's gaze sharpened. "No, I made you hear what your God lacked the strength to say." The siphon surged. Solan's projection spasmed, not in rage, but resistance. His eyes found mine. For a heartbeat, the chains binding him dimmed, and I felt something I had never felt from him before. Not command, not expectation, apology. The emotion was not transmitted as language. It was presence pressed against presence. A god who had built an order on radiant certainty, now confronting the cost of that certainty. I never commanded the oracle's death. Solan's presence pulsed faintly, not spoken aloud, felt. The chains around him tightened, suppressing the impulse. Malrick's jaw tightened slightly. Do not romanticize weakness, Caelan. Weakness, Maeryn spat. He's bound. Yes, Malrick said evenly, because he hesitated. The word landed heavy. Gods do not have the luxury of hesitation, Malrick continued. When divine authority fractures, mortals suffer. When Solan began questioning structural decisions. Discipline weakened. Paladins doubted, regions destabilized, faith diffused. You feared losing control, I said. I feared collapse. The siphon brightened again. Solan's projection dimmed further, and beneath that dimming something else stirred. Not radiance, density, a presence like a star compressed to the brink of ignition. Null star. I had felt that presence before. Faint, distant, sorrowful. Now it pressed closer. Not intervening, not acting. Watching. Malrick did not yet perceive it. He was too focused on control. He raised his hand. The siphon intensified. Light poured from Solan in invisible strands, drawn into Malrick's form. Malrick inhaled sharply as power consolidated inside him. He radiated stability, precision, authority stripped of ambiguity, and the more he stabilized, the more the chamber trembled. Outside the sealed doors, distant clashes echoed, steel on steel. Shouts, divine surges colliding unpredictably. The Tribunal was fracturing. Malrick sought to become its singular axis. I am preventing civil war, he said. You are causing it, Lysa said hoarsely. Her fire flickered against the mirrored cage, reflecting back in jagged, painful bursts. You mistake turbulence for decay, Malrick replied. The storm precedes the clear sky. Solan's presence flickered again. This time, not apology, memory, my initiation, the oath, the warmth in my chest when I first swore to serve, the pride, the certainty. Then another memory layered atop it, the oracle's calm voice. Your God did not speak freely. Then Maeryn's confession. I obeyed once when I shouldn't have. Then Bram's steady reminder. Faith that cannot refuse is not faith. The chains binding my wrists tightened. They responded to the internal shift, not the words, the interpretation. Malrick noticed. Do not attempt reinterpretation, he said sharply. That alone confirmed my suspicion. The bindings were oath-anchored, literalist, built on singular definitions. They would not withstand nuance, which meant Malrick himself believed in rigid interpretation. That was his flaw. The siphon pulsed violently as Solan struggled again. This time I felt something deeper, not regret, fear, not of death, of being forced to become what Malrick wanted. A god stripped of doubt. Stripped of moral tension, reduced to singular authority. Solan's presence brushed mine again. I am not what he makes of me, the sensation conveyed. Then pain, the chains constricted. Malrick's expression hardened. You see, he said to me, he resists what must be done. He resists enslavement. He resists decisiveness. The siphon array flared brighter. The marble beneath Malrick cracked slightly under pressure. That was new. He was accelerating. because he sensed instability, because something beneath the siphon was shifting. Nullstar's presence intensified again. Closer, not angry, not triumphant, patient. The chamber lights flickered. Maeryn strained. Caelan. Now. I closed my eyes, not in prayer, in parsing. I will serve the light. The words of my oath burned in memory. What is the light? Thalen, the Tribunal, truth. Malrick had conflated them. Structure equals authority equals divinity equals obedience. But that was not the oath I swore. I swore to serve the light, not the Tribunal, not hierarchy, the light. And light is not owned. The chains tightened painfully as that thought crystallized. They detected deviation. The siphon surged in reaction. Solin's projection flickered violently. Malrick turned sharply toward me. Do not fracture the binding. Then release him. That is not negotiable. Another pulse, stronger. Solin's presence inside me dimmed further, and beneath that dimming, Nullstar's density pulsed. A voice, not of command but of witnessing presence, brushed the edges of my awareness. Choose, not instruction, invitation. The chains around my wrists flared. Pain seared down my arms. Malrick raised his hand. Radiant force struck me, pinning me against the air as if gravity had inverted. You would destabilize divine order for interpretation, he demanded. For conscience, I gasped. Conscience is variable. Authority must not be. He stepped closer, light radiating outward in harsh clarity. You were my finest exemplar, Caelan. Unwavering, precise, loyal. I shaped you for clarity. You shaped obedience. Yes, the word did not waver, and obedience sustains civilization. The siphon intensified. Solin's projection screamed silently. This time the emotion transmitted was not regret. It was refusal. He would not break free violently. He would not shatter the chamber, because collateral would follow. He was choosing restraint. And Malrick called that weakness. Nullstar's presence swelled again, not interfering, but aligning closer to me. The chamber temperature dropped subtly. Light bent strangely at the edges of the siphon array. Malrick faltered for half a heartbeat. What is that? He murmured. He felt it now, not clearly, but as pressure beneath his ritual. I exhaled slowly and spoke. I serve the light. The chains tightened violently, which means I refuse its distortion. The lattice cracked slightly along my right wrist. Malrick's eyes widened. Stop. I protect the innocent. The chains flared, which includes the god you bind. The siphon array destabilized briefly. Solin's projection brightened faintly. Malrick roared and unleashed a surge of condensed radiance directly into me. It struck like a collapsing star. Pain exploded through my ribs. The chains tightened to breaking point. And beneath the pain, Nullstar's presence steadied me. Not shielding, not amplifying, simply witnessing. And that steadiness changed something, because Malrick's power fed on singular authority, and singular authority requires isolation. Witness dissolves isolation. The lattice cracked again, this time audibly. Maeryn shouted my name. Bram's suppression circles flickered. Lisa's mirrored cage fractured in hairline splits. Malrick advanced, light roaring around him. You are a fracture, he snarled. Yes, I said through blood and pain. I am. The right restraint shattered. Radiance exploded outward. The siphon array screamed in feedback. Solin's projection flared violently. Nullstar's density surged closer. And the duel truly began. The fracture made flesh. The moment the first restraint shattered, the chamber lost symmetry. Malrick staggered as feedback from the broken lattice surged through the siphon array. The radiant strands draining Thalen snapped taut, some recoiling like severed nerves. Light did not dim. It howled. The chamber of adjudication had always amplified divine presence. Now it amplified conflict. My freed arm dropped uselessly at my side for a heartbeat, nerves screaming from radiant backlash. The remaining bindings constricted violently, trying to reassert structural control. Malrick raised both hands. "Contain him," he roared, though no one else was present to obey. The siphon array responded automatically. Lines of gold and ash flared brighter, rerouting energy to compensate for my fracture. But that was his mistake. He had built the ritual to drain a god. He had not built it to withstand a paladin choosing interpretation. Forced breath into my lungs. Pain sharpened clarity. Tholen's presence flickered again, not fading now, but struggling. And beneath the strain, I felt something shift. He was no longer merely enduring. He was deciding. Malrick hurled a spear of condensed radiance at me. It crossed the chamber in less than a blink. I raised my bound arm instinctively. The remaining restraint flared, then detonated as the spear struck. The impact threw me across the chamber. Marble shattered beneath my back. Air fled my lungs. For a moment, the world narrowed to white noise. Then heat, not Malrick's, Lisa. Her mirrored cage fractured fully as the backlash cascaded through the chamber's geometry. Flames burst outward, not wild and unfocused, but controlled in a tight spiral around her form. She stepped free of collapsing glyphs. "Enough," she shouted. She hurled a bolt of searing fire toward the siphon array. Malrick redirected it mid-air with a flick of his wrist, bending it aside like a ribbon in wind. "Arcane interference is irrelevant," he snapped. But it wasn't. The siphon flickered again, because it was designed for unilateral flow, not cross-current. Maeryn tore free next. She did not speak. She launched herself at Malrick with blade drawn, her cracked gauntlet blazing erratically. Malrick met her charge with a backhand of radiant force that sent her skidding across the floor. But she had not intended to win. She had intended to disrupt his concentration, and for half a second, the siphon slackened. In that half second, Thalen surged, not violently, deliberately. The chains binding his projection dimmed, his face lifted, and I felt him fully for the first time since Emberfall, not as distant deity, as presence, as mind, as will restrained too long. "I will not be wielded." The sensation pressed into me. Malrick sensed it and snarled. "You do not get to hesitate now," he roared upward. The siphon flared blindingly bright. He drew deeper, far deeper. Light poured from Thalen in torrents. Malrick's form elongated in radiance, silhouette sharpening, edges blazing white gold. The air itself vibrated. Bram shattered his suppression circles with a thunderous pulse of healing energy, not aimed at Malrick, but at us. Warmth flooded my limbs, knitting damaged nerves, steadying my breath. "Stand," Bram commanded quietly. I rose. Malrick turned toward me, eyes blazing with condensed divinity. "You think conscience is strength?" he thundered. "It is the only strength that matters." He extended his hand. The chamber inverted. Gravity shifted sideways. The marble beneath my feet rippled like liquid glass. Radiant chains erupted from the floor, attempting to bind me anew, but I had already stepped outside their singular definition. I serve the light, I said again. The chains faltered, not your interpretation of it. They shattered before reaching my wrists. Malrick's fury sharpened into something colder. Then I will remove your ability to interpret. He drew a massive arc of divine force from the siphon and hurled it at me. This was not a spear. It was a wave, a collapsing horizon of searing authority. I did not block it. I stepped forward into it. Pain exploded through every nerve. My armor blackened, my skin blistered. But I did not retreat, because as the wave struck, Thalen surged again, this time not in restraint, in alignment. He did not pour power into me like a weapon. He did not override my will. He steadied it. Warmth returned to the center of my chest. Not overwhelming, not absolute, just enough. The wave broke around me like surf against stone. Malrick's eyes widened. You cannot withstand that. I'm not. I lifted my blade, cracked, scorched, trembling. I'm choosing through it. Nullstar's presence surged then. Not subtle, not distant. The air darkened, not with shadow, but with density. Light bent around a point, forming above the siphon array, a sphere of compressed brilliance. Not white, not gold. A deeper hue, like starlight seen through vacuum. Malrick staggered. What is that? He demanded. The siphon screamed as feedback multiplied. Thalen's projection brightened in defiance. The chains binding him flickered erratically. Nullstar was not breaking them. It was destabilizing the architecture around them, because the siphon relied on unchallenged authority, and Nullstar was the embodiment of questioned light. A crack split the chamber ceiling. Marble rained down in glittering shards. Outside, the clash of Tribunal factions intensified. The entire citadel trembled. Malrick roared and drew everything he could from the siphon. Light condensed around him into a blazing corona. His voice deepened, layered with divine resonance. I am the radiant Tribunal, he declared, and in that moment, he believed it. He hurled a final, overwhelming blast of consolidated divinity toward the forming sphere of Nullstar. It collided, and the chamber ceased to obey natural law. Light imploded inward, sound vanished. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then the implosion reversed. A shockwave erupted outward in all directions. Malrick was thrown across the chamber. The siphon array shattered into molten gold. The chains binding Thalen snapped. His projection flared brilliant and then vanished. Not destroyed, withdrawn. The density above the circle coalesced into shape. Humanoid, radiant yet dark. Edges not sharp, but absolute. Nullstar manifested, not vast, contained, watching. No wrath, no command, presence. Malrick struggled to rise. Robes scorched, radiance unstable. You are sealed, he hissed at the figure. Nullstar's head tilted slightly. I was bound, a voice said, not booming, not thunderous, clear. And I waited. The words reverberated not through air, but through certainty. Malrick lunged forward, drawing fractured divinity into a jagged blade of light. He swung at the manifested form. The blade passed through Nullstar and struck the marble behind, carving a canyon through the chamber wall. Nullstar had not moved, had not blocked, had not retaliated. Malrick froze. You do not command me, Nullstar said. I command the light, Malrick roared. No, Nullstar replied gently. You command structure. The distinction broke something in Malrick's expression. Outside, explosions echoed closer. The chamber doors burst inward as opposing paladins clashed in the corridors. Interpreters and obedientists. The Tribunal was at war with itself. Maeryn grabbed my arm. We need to move. She was right. This chamber was collapsing. Malrick was unstable. Thalen had withdrawn. Nullstar was present, but not intervening beyond balance, because choice remained ours. Bram pulled injured civilians toward the archway. Lisa unleashed controlled jets of flame to clear falling debris. Keth's roar echoed from somewhere beyond the corridor. Alive, Thalen's arrows whistled through the doorway, striking hostile zealots attempting to enter. Malrick staggered to his feet again. "You will not leave," he snarled. He thrust his hand toward us. The remaining fragments of siphoned divinity coalesced into a final blast. I stepped between him and my companions. This time, I did not speak the oath. I did not reinterpret. I simply chose. The light flared around me. Not Malrick's concentrated blaze, not Solan's full radiance. Mine, aligned, not absolute, but steady. The blast struck. It split around me, half diverted into the shattered siphon, half absorbed into Nullstar's density above. Malrick screamed as the feedback cascaded back into him. His radiance flickered violently. For the first time, he looked afraid. Nullstar regarded him without anger. "You bound what you feared," the manifested presence said. "You consumed what you did not trust." Malrick fell to one knee. The chamber ceiling groaned ominously. "Go," Maeryn shouted. We ran, through fractured marble, through smoke and divine static, through corridors where paladins clashed in confusion. Keth joined us with bloodied axe and triumphant snarl. Thalen fell into step beside me without comment, loosing arrows with clinical precision. Bram shielded civilians behind us with hastily woven wards. Lisa burned through collapsing doorways to carve escape paths. The citadel was no longer a fortress. It was a fracture made stone. Behind us, the chamber of adjudication collapsed fully. A column of radiant energy shot skyward through the shattered ceiling. Not destructive, revelatory. The light was no longer centralized. It diffused outward across Dawnspire. Not controlled, freed. We burst onto the outer ramparts as the sky above the citadel warped. Stars flickered visible through unnatural tears in the firmament, and one burned brighter. Not white, not gold, dense, steady. Nullstar did not follow, but its presence remained, pressing at the edge of perception, waiting. Maeryn gripped my shoulder. "What now?" I looked back at the collapsing heart of the Tribunal. Solan's presence flickered faintly again, weakened, but no longer bound, not commanding, listening, and beneath that listening, another voice brushed my awareness, clearer now, closer. Come, not order, invitation. The chamber of first light lay beneath the citadel, ancient, sealed, where the earliest bindings had been forged, where Nullstar had first been imprisoned. The call did not pull, it allowed, and I understood. This was not the end, it was the threshold. I turned toward the inner sanctum stairs, descending beneath the citadel ruins. "I'm going below," I said. Maeryn did not hesitate. "Then we're with you." The light flickered across the shattered skyline, not stable, not certain, but honest, and somewhere beneath the fractured heart of Dawnspire, a voice that did not command waited for my answer.